What about you? You're very welcome. And as always, a very special shout out to my Patreon friends. And you're very welcome along. Now, I remain on tour with my good friend Terry McHugh. And last week we played Lisburn and Omagh. This coming week we'll be in Cookstown on the 6th, Coleraine on the 7th. And we'll be in the Ulster Hall on the 8th. And there's still a few tickets left for some of them venues. If you fancy coming along, have a bit of crack. Now, a special shout out has to go out to my old Declan in Omagh and Roberta and her soon-to-be husband in Lisburn. They took a bit of stick, but they took it in very, very good form. So a bit of fun to be had. And they're all lovely people. Thank you for coming. Much appreciated. International Holocaust Memorial Day was held last Saturday or so. I'm not sure what it was, but it marked 80 years since the liberation of the people held in Auschwitz after the end of the Second World War. Now, Michael D Higgins, the Irish president, well, he gave a speech in Dublin, and that caused a wee bit of controversy. Now, this is just a wee segment of his speech.
That those in Israel who mourn their loved ones, those who have been waiting for the release of hostages, or the thousands searching for relatives in the rubble in Gaza, will welcome the long overdue ceasefire for which there has been such a heavy price paid. The grief inflicted on families by the horrific acts of October 7th, and the response to it is unimaginable. The loss of civilian life, the majority women and children, their displacement, loss of homes and necessary institutions for life itself. The current agreement must end the killing, but as a matter of urgency deliver the massive scale-up in humanitarian need, which is urgently needed to save more lives.
Israeli ambassador to Ireland, or she was anyway, Dana Ehrlich, well, she accused President Higgins of politicising the Memorial Day by mentioning the conflict in Gaza. Indeed, the Israeli Foreign Minister, Gideon Saar, he went even further. And he said that President Higgins had resorted to a cheap, despicable provocation during the event. There were even protests during the president's speech, with some in the audience standing up and turning their backs to the stage, and a few were so vocal that they had to be removed by security. Now, this controversy comes in the wake of the Israeli embassy closing in Ireland due to what the Netanyahu government described as the extreme anti-Israeli policies of the Irish government. President Higgins highlighted and has continued to highlight the fact that he has always strongly condemned anti-Semitism time and time again throughout his career. Now, the cynical attempt by the Netanyahu government to conflate opposition to his genocidal conflict in Gaza with anti-Semitism is rejected even by Holocaust survivors. World-renowned psychiatrist, Canadian psychiatrist Gabor Mate, well, he had this to say on the subject.
In my teenage years, I was a Zionist. I believed in the dream of the Jewish state being reborn in the ancient homeland, until I realized that this dream was accomplished by imposing a nightmare on the local population of Palestinians, who had to be expelled and killed and dispossessed and oppressed in order to realize the Jewish dream. And ever since then, I've been very concerned with the issue. And more recently, what's been going on there, I have to say personally, from the emotional level, it's been the heaviest, darkest time of my life as an adult, for sure.
Another survivor, 87-year-old Stephen Kapos, well, he had these strong views about the Israeli war in Gaza.
I'm Stephen Kapos. I am from Hungary, Budapest. I was born in Budapest. And during the Second World War, during the Holocaust, when it reached Budapest, which was fairly late in the war, 1944, I was 7 years old. Part of my family ended up in Israel, and when I visited them, I was completely shocked how, with their background suffering during the Holocaust, they still, many of them became very racist. And I couldn't understand that, how, having experienced all the fear and humiliation, they could mete it out to others.
Unlike other nations, such as the UK and USA, who've offered both weapons and uncritical support to the Israeli government, Ireland has stood with the beleaguered Palestinian people and called out what international courts have deemed to be war crimes by the Israeli Defense Forces. Michael D Higgins' refusal to copy the moral myopia of other national leaders and ignore the suffering of the Palestinian civilians over the last year is to his and his nation's credit. There is no doubt, however, that the attack by Hamas on Israel and the taking of Israeli hostages triggered a visceral rage in many Israelis. The pain of the Holocaust continues to trickle down the generations. And it would be naive, deliberately naive, to say that anti-Semitism no longer exists. It may be anecdotal, but I have personal experience of anti-Semitism, which, believe it or not, happened while I was on a trip to Auschwitz itself many years ago. I'd always been interested in history, and the books of Holocaust survivor, the Italian Primo Levi, opened my eyes to the unimaginable horrors of the Nazi concentration camps. But it wasn't until I visited Auschwitz that the visceral reality of the inhumanity and slaughter hit home. I have never been in a place that reeked of such pain. I remember walking through the camp and commenting to my wife the fact it was completely silent. There was no life. Even the birds had not returned. There was no sound in this place. So horrible was it. The sadistic cruelty of the German extermination camps knew no bounds. And while naturally the sights of mountains of discarded shoes and shoe cases and even human hair belonging to the Jews who had been gassed and burned, well, it could only strike bewilderment in any normal human being. It was the almost banal sadism of those in charge which took my breath away. One thing that remains with me, it isn't those big things. It was in one of the torture houses. The Nazis had created these torture houses along the way. Red brick, innocuous-looking buildings. And in one of those buildings, they had built what looked in the corner to all the world like a chimney. It just looked like an oversized chimney. But I noticed there was a hole in the bottom of this. And this wasn't a chimney. This was a holding place where normally maybe two men could stand in this confined space. The Nazis forced 6 naked men to crawl into this confined space and stand. Just stand in the darkness, alone, yet surrounded by other men. And there they stood for hours and days until one of them would drop dead, be dragged out to be replaced by another poor victim. Now, over the last year, Jews have yet again been forced into such confined spaces, this time by the homicidal lunatics of Hamas. Now, on our trip to Auschwitz, we stayed in Krakow, which is a beautiful, beautiful ancient city. And we happened to be there around December, so they were having their Christmas market in the big square. And a very colourful and wonderful thing that was. But having been in Auschwitz the previous day, I was genuinely stunned to notice that a lot of the stalls were selling these little figurines, little dolls, little caricatures of Hasidic Jews. But they were Jews either holding or counting money. The old racist trope about Jews. I subsequently learned that these are known as the Lucky Jew dolls, and they're still very popular in Central Europe, where many homes have them as they're supposed to bring luck and money. I found them a chilling indication that anti-Semitism was alive and well in modern Central Europe. Now, on a walk, we did a walk around the city, and I knew a bit of the history. And I brought my wife to what had been the Jewish ghetto during that terrible time in the city's history. And I noticed on a wall that there was a plaque. And the plaque said that it was to the director, Roman Polanski, who had been in the ghetto as a boy and had just managed to escape to the USA before the curtain came down. Coincidentally, about an hour later, we were wandering through another part of the city, and they have a Holocaust memorial sort of square. And this involved oversized metal empty seats, just dozens of these massive empty seats sitting in the square. And as I was passing, I noticed that there were 2 or 3 men with commercial cameras, not tourist video cameras, commercial cameras, and they were filming this rather diminutive wee man sitting in one of the chairs wearing an overcoat. So we're walking past, and I just looked over. It was Roman Polanski himself, the man himself, who I'd mentioned to my wife only an hour earlier, was sitting in one of these chairs. A weird coincidence, weird one. And it was such a strange coincidence, I happened to mention it to the taxi driver who was taking us to the airport the next day. Now, the driver spoke perfect English, and he paused when I mentioned Polanski's name. And I thought for a second he was going to comment on the life that Polanski had in the USA. His wife had been killed. Sharon Tate was her name. She was pregnant at the time, and she was one of the victims of the Charlie Manson gang in 1969. Or I thought he was going to mention the fact Polanski himself had been involved in a sex scandal which had caused him to flee the USA. But no. Instead, this man paused and then spat out in contempt. Polanski, the Jew. Needless to say, he did not get a tip when he left us off at the airport. And again, this proved to me that even 60 odd years as it was then after the end of the Second World War and the slaughter of Auschwitz, anti-Semitism remained in the air and was not far away. Now, telling you all this is anecdotal, and it no way excuses nor explains the horror being perpetrated in Gaza. Indeed, it's the opposite, as it raises the question, how can a people who have experienced such prejudice and persecution have no compunction in inflicting the same on the innocent Palestinian people? There's the conundrum. Back home, Edwin Poots, the Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly, continues his campaign to appear relevant by once again criticising his fellow MLAs for what he described as extremely discourteous behaviour. This comes a week, of course, after Catwalk Edwin Poots admonished other MLAs for their dress sense. But to accuse others of discourteous behaviour is a bit rich coming from Edwin. This, after all, is the man who denounced homosexuals as being both unnatural and an abomination. Now, to add to his homophobia, he decided to throw in a wee bit of misogyny by suggesting that then First Minister Arlene Foster, the leader of his own party, well, Edwin advised her that her most important job would not be as political leader of Northern Ireland. No, her most important jobs would be as wife, mother, and daughter. So, marking the first anniversary of the return of the Assembly this coming week, Mr. Poots decided it would be a good time to explain to people that it was his role and that of his officials to seek to create conditions for our business to be done properly and for effective scrutiny to be conducted.
Whilst I understand that individually these matters may appear trivial to some, Together, the procedures of this House underline the sittings of the Assembly are not just another engagement in members' diaries, and this is just not another meeting room. At one time, there was only 90 people who have the immense privilege of participating in this chamber, and they are given that privilege by the people that elect them. As an institution, this Assembly is the prime source of authority for devolved matters. Therefore, with privilege given to us to be here comes the responsibility to exercise that authority by representing our constituents, holding ministers to account and taking decisions to change policy and the law to address the issues impacting all of the community. Respecting our courtesies and procedures is about respecting the serious business we have to do and respecting the people who put us here to do it.
Oh, very well. Wise words indeed. But somewhat hypocritical coming from the likes of Edwin Poots. Because this is a man with a checkered past regarding proper procedure in public office. Indeed, it would have been more appropriate for Poots to give such advice in his own home. Following the decision last year by the Northern Ireland local government standards commissioner to ban Edwin's son Luke for 4 years due to his breaches of multiple parts of the councillor's code of conduct. I've already covered this, so here's a wee synopsis of that story. Luke Poots, who sat on Lisburn and Castlereagh Council between 2013 and 2019. Good eye, Luke. And yes, you're right if you've guessed a connection between Luke and his father, Edwin Poots, recently elected Speaker of the recently reconvened Northern Ireland Assembly. So what happened was, after investigations by the Northern Ireland Local Government Standards Commissioner, Luke has been banned for 4 years from holding any public office, with the Commissioner deciding he had breached multiple parts of the Councillor's Code of Conduct. His disqualification relates to a 2-year period when he was sitting on the Council's Planning Committee, during which Edwin Poots Sr. made representations for and against 35 planning proposals. Things came tumbling down after Luke chaired a planning committee meeting in 2017 where Father Edwin lobbied for 2 houses to be built at Macrocunlush Lane outside Larne. I know I pronounced that wrong, but there's no way I'm ever going to pronounce it properly. Now, what I can't understand is how neither Luke nor his father recognised this could be seen as a conflict of interest. You'd have thought Luke would have been sitting there as the chairperson and looked up and seen his dad. Hold on, that's my dad. No, hold on. No, let me see. No, it's definitely my dad. I recognise him. Oh, I've seen him before. That's definitely my dad. Definitely my dad. I'll have to excuse myself. And you'd have thought if he didn't do it, maybe Edwin would have done a Darth Vader. You know what I mean? Saw Luke and went, "Luke, you are my son. I must leave." No, didn't happen. That Edwin Poots, now sitting as Speaker of the Northern Ireland Assembly and taking home a salary of £90,000 a year, feels entitled to admonish others on proper political protocol is a testament of just how dysfunctional our body politic now is. Wise up, Edwin. Just sit down, son. Keep your mouth shut. Press your wee bell when you need to. That's all you're there for. We neither need nor want your advice on anything. In the world of sports, Belfast MMA fighter Paul Hughes lost in a very close contest in Dubai against champion Usman Nurmagomedov. I'm not going to make him that seriously. I'll Usman. We'll call him Usman. Right? Good fighter. Don't get me wrong, good fighter. And this was a massive step up for the young Belfast fighter. But many watching the fight have argued that Hughes actually deserved the win. Still, Hughes took the decision against him with good grace, and he pointed out to his opponent's team that not all Irish MMA fighters were the same. A wee bit of a dig at the behaviour of disgraced Conor McGregor. Now, McGregor didn't take this too well, taking to social media to attack the young fighter with Now, while McGregor is yesterday's man, and a disgraced yesterday's man, Hughes has a bright and exciting future. And unlike McGregor, his mature behaviour after his recent loss would indicate that he will be both a credit and a great ambassador for Ireland. Whereas McGregor just can toddle off to his mansion. You know what I mean? Exactly.
You'll do nothing. You hear me? You'll do nothing.